Ever felt like you're alone in a crowd, even when there are people all around you? Like it's just you and your thoughts floating around, while everyone else seems so connected? Or maybe one evening you sat in your apartment looking at people outside, taking an evening stroll, talking to each other, and you feel alone in your own little world with some superficial connections that you think you probably have. Well, here's the thing. Loneliness is not just feeling alone. It's actually your brain trying to tell you something really important. Hi, I'm Janvi, and I've always been curious about why we think, feel, and act the way we do. And I love studying deeper into things. So, as you would expect, in this video, we'll be getting into what really is the feeling of loneliness that we all experience at some point or another. And why we feel it is also a really important question. And we will be addressing that as well. So, if you're ready to take a new look at this unique yet shared experience from a whole new depth, let's get right into it. Loneliness. It's a feeling we all experience at one point or another, but one we barely ever talk about openly. A different kind of struggle surrounds it, which is why we also feel shameful about this experience sometimes. Researchers have found that loneliness is a universal experience, affecting people across age groups, genders, and cultures. So it's definitely not a shameful experience, rather it's a shared experience. It doesn't just come from being physically isolated. It can be understood as perceived social isolation, which means the gap between the relationships you have versus the ones you want to have. Loneliness is more about the mind. It is a mental state, a feeling of disconnection. You know, that sense of being apart from others, even when you're right there with them. Imagine this as your brain's own kind of hunger. Just like the emptiness in your stomach drives you to find food, the feeling of loneliness drives you to find connections, urging you to reach out to people and connect with them. But before we move further, let's be clear on the difference between feeling alone and choosing to be alone. As we just discussed, loneliness is not just about being by yourself. It's actually that quiet ache for connection, but feeling like you just can't reach it. Like you feel separated, abandoned, or maybe even rejected by the people around you. But solitude is a choice. It is when you decide to be by yourself. Just enjoying the quiet, recharging, and knowing that you still have those social connections to come back to. You're not lonely per se, you're just taking a breather. Turns out, solitude is actually good for your mental health. It helps you focus, recharge, and really get back in touch with yourself. But loneliness, well, let's just say it can have the opposite effect. But the question comes up, why do we feel lonely in the first place? Let's rewind a bit. Back in the time, way back okay? Our ancestors relied on each other for survival. So being part of a group wasn't just a nice to have thing. It was not complementary to survival. It was actually essential for survival. Fast forward to today, and guess what? Our brains are still wired for that deep need to connect and belong. But instead of huddling around a fire, we are connecting through screens and emails. So while it is a good medium of communication, I will give it that. It can make us feel a little bit hollow sometimes. Many things can bring on loneliness. It can be moving to a new city, going through a breakup, or just not having close, meaningful connections. Emphasis on meaningful connections though. Not just connections where you feel like you're just closely related to those people. It's not about knowing more people, it's about having people around you who actually get you. Loneliness also doesn't just hit one type of person. In a new workplace, school, college, you might feel like a stranger in a whole new crowd. Later in life, things like losing loved ones, retirement, or just watching closed ones move on with their own life can bring all of those feelings back. It is not just about circumstances either, Personality plays a role too. Introverts or people who have social anxiety might find it hard to reach out to other people. Like, come on, if you feel like you're already having a panic attack with the thought of reaching out to other people, you wouldn't want to reach out to them even if you know that that's going to help you feel better, would you? Now, this creates an endless loop leading to even deeper loneliness. Sometimes, though, it's more about how we feel about ourselves. Like, the people with social anxiety or low self-esteem might think, I'm just not worth anyone's time, which leads to them pulling back from other people, which creates this endless cycle of social isolation. Every time they even think about making connections or reaching out to people that they are actually close to. Then, of course, there is social media, the double-edged sword we all have. We all love connecting online, right? But sometimes it can make us feel like we are on the outside looking in. It's actually ironic. Like, all this technology to help us connect can actually make us feel more disconnected over time. When all we see are other people's highlight reels, it's easier to feel like we're missing out on something. Research actually suggests that long hours on social media can make us feel even more depressed and isolated. So when you find yourself scrolling through Instagram for hours, it might be time for you to check with yourself if you're craving real connection. But here's the good news. Understanding why we feel lonely and how we feel lonely can help us tackle it better. So whether it's connecting with a friend, joining a new group, or just getting out there, there are so many ways to find that connection, that deep sense of belongingness that we're all wired for. In our next video, we'll tackle this feeling head on. We learn how to identify how it shows up in our body and later figure out how to build those social connections, the real social connections that you crave. Thank you for joining me today. And if you actually learned something meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comment section on what really helps you when you're feeling lonely. Stay connected, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.